Where's he live? Boston, California.
Awesome, Chris.
That was running through my mind.
That's right. If you're going to make a shank, you better go to the right place to get, trained.
Yeah.
I always think that if we're going to save this world, we need to put mothers in charge. Vote for your mama. That's what I'm saying. I feel like I won the lottery. And so if you didn't know anything about me, I feel like I've won the lottery in life.
Well, now you know the American voters chose the right man, because now you know the rest of the story.
Hey everybody, as I'm editing this, I realize that the audio has a couple glitches, but we've got some new equipment on the way and the problem should be resolved for the next podcast. So thanks for watching and back to the interview.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Suburban Tactical. Today we have a great guest, owner and founder of D-Rocket Designs, Darriel Caston. A little bit about Darriel: grew up as an Air Force brat, is now working as an engineer and uses a lot of that experience for designing and creating these knives. Also just done some sci-fi writing. Designer. D-Rocket Knives has also won shows in Oregon and the Bay Area. Designed knives for CRKT and also designed knives for SpaceX. So welcome to the show, Darriel. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you.
We look forward to where this is going to go. We also have Matt Combs here with Bill. We'll get into what he does a little bit. And we have Randy Miller behind doing our audio and video. So welcome, everybody. So to kind of start off, tell us a little bit about yourself, Darriel. Where'd you grow up and what kind of got you where you're at now?
I've been sort of blessed being in the Air Force. So I've been around the world. I would say more than half of my younger life was in Europe. So Italy, Germany, first Germany, Italy, then back to Germany. So I had the privilege of seeing other cultures in other part of the world. But I think what made my life special is probably my mother, who loved history. And she wanted to be an English teacher. But in her time period, all the boys got the money, they went to college, and all the girls were, staying at home. But that didn't stop her from learning and teaching. So when I was in Europe, my mom made it a big issue of going to museums, castles, seeing history. In Europe, there's also places that what they call living history, where you can learn how to make something, right? You can learn how to shod a horse, or you can learn how to, make pottery or make glass or blow glass. So not many people get that chance, but I got a chance to do stuff like that because of my mother.
So what age were you traveling in Europe and Germany?
It was probably, so I was there from about 3 to 6. Then we came back when I was about 6th grade to 5th grade. Then, of course, we came back to Edwards Air Force Base, and I spent the year there. Got my scholarship, played football, but then my dad went back to Germany, so I would go back every summer and Christmas and actually still run around Europe and actually work there. Altogether, that's probably about maybe 12 years of my life from, 0 to 20. So more than half of my time.
Where did you enjoy spending most of the time? In the U.S., Germany, Europe?
Okay, that's a tough one. I would say Italy was probably the best, but we were probably there for almost 5 years. And I was there during my formative years, right? So I'm there from 8th grade to 11th grade, right? I'm there for quite a bit of time. I'm old enough at that point to actually travel by myself or in groups with people to Europe. My mom was that wonderful person with that fine place, a real knife show, if you want to put it a knife show, was seeing a samurai exhibit. God, it was swords, everything that dealt with samurais, the armor, everything. And it was actually in Munich, Germany. So my mom actually made a trip just for me to go actually there and to see this stuff. So she really was that type of person that really lifted you up.
Awesome.
Also, my mom was weird this way. Everybody plays sports in my family. As you know, Matt, my brother played football. He played professional football. Every single person in my family went to college on a scholarship, which was just pretty cool, right?
Yes, very.
Well, but my mom had this thing that if we did sports, we had to do something that dealt with art, right? She didn't care if it was band. She didn't care if it was speech. She didn't care if it was choir, but you had to balance it out with something, right? And I think that balance of the physical, mental, spiritual is really important for a person to grow,
Right.
right? And I consider myself different, or I think different, because of what my mother sort of gave me, you know? She gave me
You may
that.
have just answered that, Darrell, and I'm sorry it's maybe jumping
Yeah.
ahead, but in your designs and the things that come out of that brain, does your mother inspire a lot of that though?
I don't know if she inspired it or gave me the base and foundation for it, right? She was into making us read books no matter what. You can pick the book. In my family, Sunday, we didn't go to church, we went to the library. And my mom, and we got books every week from the library. And my mom had this game, right? We go to the library. She says, all right, Darrell, I want you to pick a direction, go a certain amount of steps, make the right turn, make a couple more steps, make a left turn, make a couple more steps. And wherever section you were in, I want you to get a book or find something that might interest you in. So, it was it was almost like a game. We were doing this since we were maybe 3 years old until I left. The library was so extremely important to my mom in knowledge. And when you go to a place, you're absorbing all kinds of information. I think it's reflected in my art, it's reflected to all that stuff that I seen, even maybe it was like just for that day. Always it affects you. It layers you. It gives you those layers to look at the world a little bit different. And I find myself doing that. I can walk anywhere and I can see a shape or this, and I can apply it to a knife or give me an idea. It just opened my mind to possibilities.
So you believe is this a fair statement to say that had your mom not really pushed you or drove you to that artistic path, going to the library every Sunday, versus staying down the sports and football path, do you think that is probably why you are where you are?
I think it's who I am, right? Yeah. Not just why I create knives. It really defined who I am as a person. Right? Just the ability to see, people as people, cultures as cultures, races as races, and find that everybody brings such this beautiful tapestry, to the world. Every culture, I don't care what culture you pick, they have some kind of art or language or poetry that can make your, world better. So
there's some things that you did before D-Rocket, and I mean, artistically, that maybe evolved into what is, of course, D-Rocket Designs.
My mom got me into haiku poetry, and I still do it now. And I think it's reflected in the simplicity of my knives. Haiku is a very simple form of poetry, but it says so much. That simplicity. And it gave me this love for the Japanese culture. I find myself more drawn to like the Scandinavian, very simple, very sleek, very useful cultures. And one of the things I learned from that is that there's complexity in the simplicity.
Right.
If you really look at a Japanese sword, it looks very simple, right? But if you really study the Japanese sword, there's a whole level of complexity and skill that's required to make that sword.
See, that you're referring to.
Yeah, and I find that exciting.
I was at a gun show this last weekend, and the guy sitting across from me happened to be a sword guy, a knife guy with a lot of historic items. And I heard it probably 1,000 times because he was telling everybody who walked up to his table that two swords that looked pretty similar to me. One was a copy, one was a real thing. And just hearing about it and how much work goes into it. I mean, it's just amazing what craftsmanship it took to complete a sword that you were going to use to defend your life with without having any concerns of it breaking or falling apart. And it truly is an art that is unfortunately probably going away.
Yeah, and the sad part about it, some of that technology, if you want to call it technology, skill, tradition that makes some of these weapons. I have a Japanese sword that's in my house that's probably 500 years old.
Wow.
It's an actually beautiful piece. I had a friend whose wife was in a bad situation, and he's also a sword collector. And so I gave him a bunch of knives. I gave him like 100 knives so he could help pay for his wife's cancer treatment. And he ends up giving me this sword. And we find out the sword is worth 50 grand.
Wow.
Afterwards, it was so unique and stuff like that. And I told him, I said, I don't know if I could take this. He said, you're the only one that stepped forward to help me with my wife and get something. You didn't ask me for anything. I'm not asking you for anything, right? He said you did it in sort of like a good faith situation in a good way. And there's no way I'm going to take that sword back from you or ask you for any money for it, right?
Wow. Pretty awesome.
It is probably my most prized possession now, not just because I love swords, right? But because of the story behind it, right? And the friendship and the love you can have for your other person, and the compassion you can have for somebody. So there's a lot more that goes into, just like I said, there's the complexity and the simplicity, right? We just gave each other something, but there's a whole lot of complexity that's wrapped up into that, right? A lot of emotions and complexities and love and caring. So I think my mom gave me that. I try to put that in everything I make and everything I do and how I treat people. I find, and I know this sounds weird, but I find that most artists are mostly kind people. They're good people. I think humans are made to create art and to create something that goes past them, goes longer to them, or affects another person. It really opens up the heart and spirit.
Yeah, it makes you feel good when you do something for somebody. And I mean, I get it quite a few years. I'll make somebody will come in with some idea, and it's like, well, I've never done that before, but let's give it a shot. And and I give them a product, and they're always thrilled, and it makes you feel good.
Yeah, yeah. You feed somebody out. You feed somebody, in a sense, you feed yourself too, right?
Yeah.
I'm doing metaphorically, right? You feed somebody. You don't expect to be fed, right? But you do get fed in a way that you might not have understood until the deed was done.
You might not you individually, but I shouldn't say it that way, but people might not be able to understand that as effectively as you do as arts. Because of everything that you're describing, the complexity that's inside the simplicity. And it's really amazing how that, not only in, the work and designs, but the interactions that you have with people that I've seen and experienced over the last 2.5 years. You really bring people together in a lot of ways. And that, whether it's your mother, instilling those values into you, the artistic drive and the creativity that, truly is an openness to be different. I believe you have a pretty phenomenal story to share to the world.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And I have to agree with you. When you get into a community that appreciates the art, even if it's guns, right? I consider gun making art, right? And even gun designing, when we get into that, I know that we can consider them weapons to a certain degree, right? But I don't think mankind, when they made a gun, was necessarily thinking of a weapon to kill another human being. They were thinking more to eat, right? Maybe even sportsmanship, who can shoot this right there. And the same thing with knives. Knives were made to be a tool, but tools can be turned into weapons. I try to think in my mind that, A person who owns a gun is not a killer, right? They're not there to hurt anybody. They just have an appreciation for another technology or art form, right? They just have appreciation. Now, I'm saying everybody's good, but I think for the most part, 99% of the people, they have a gun. I don't even think they have a gun to protect themselves. I think it's more, a collection or sports. I don't think anybody wants to have a gun to use for protection. That's like a last thing they want to do. So that's the way I think about the world. I think some people can make something good into something horrible. Anything can become horrible.
And unfortunately, that's that 1 or 2% of the bad ones is what screws it up for all of us that enjoy, or the 99% that are out there using it correctly, using it safely, having a good time with it, enjoying it as a tool or it as a sport. But that's the world we live in, I guess.
Yeah. And when I was at the Air Force, not the Air Force, but Air Force brat, for a couple summers, I was junior range master. So I would help teach kids how to shoot guns. That's what we do in the military, right? Yeah. But it wasn't to teach the kids how to kill. It was teaching the kids how to be disciplined with something that can kill, right? Yes. Once you get that discipline, you can apply it to a lot of things, right? Being aware of what you're doing, what you're holding, where it's pointing, I think that's important. That's the only thing I would change about gun laws if I could. I would have everybody needs to be properly trained and learn a proper respect. I don't think everybody should be able to go and grab a gun. I know that might piss some people off, but I think people should be properly trained, even their children properly trained. If I own a gun, I'm going to properly train my children how to use the gun and respect the gun, right? Yeah. I don't want them to go and find it in my closet and not understand that one end could kill you, right? I want them to learn that.
I do agree with you on that. It's whether you're talking knives, firearms, whatever it is, people that don't understand it are the ones that end up having the problems with it because they're curious and push buttons and pull triggers. And if they just had a little bit of knowledge about what it can do, what it's capable of, and how to respect it, then that's problems almost all go away. And just like the firearm safety rules, you have to break at least 2 of those 5 rules to actually get into a bad situation. And it's the same thing with kids picking up a knife or a kitchen knife for that matter is, run around with it. You got to be doing usually more than one thing wrong to turn it into a serious issue.
I agree.
You mentioned a really good point though, awareness. Whether you're holding a knife or a rifle or you're touching a stove, having awareness of, what's happening right now. What am I doing? Thinking through that process. I love how you describe it.
Yeah. And my son carries knives. My son has probably 20 knives in his back room, but he understands it because we've talked about it. We talked this can cut, and he has cut himself. Don't get me wrong. But sometimes that's a good learning experience. He's only cut himself once. Now, I probably cut myself, a good 50, 60 times.
How old is your son?
He's 17 now.
Okay.
Yeah. It allowed me to really make connections with really interesting people.
So, Darriel, whenever you were talking about making the knives in the beginning, was it more about the steel, the shape of the blade, or the functionality, or a little bit of everything? What's your stick on what made your knives the way that you wanted them, or the way that you needed or wanted them to be made?
I at first my knives were small, because I worked in an office. I didn't want to intimidate anybody, but I thought even a desktop warrior wants a good knife, right? We all want something we can pull out of pocket. My grandfather always carried a knife. My dad didn't carry a knife, but my grandfather carried a knife all the time. And I think my first knife I ever got was from my grandfather or my father. I can't remember who gave me that first buck knife. But for me, what makes my knives or what I look for in a knife, I think there's got to be a harmony with knife. I just like when I look at those Japanese swords, I look for a harmony. It doesn't have to, I like good quality materials, of course, when I make a knife, but I think a knife should have some kind of harmony. It should have some kind of balance. You should, when somebody looks at it, they should be able to say that this is pretty interesting. And when you put it in your hand, you want to be able to feel, I don't know if you want to call that love of design in that knife.
So obviously it's very different between a sword and a knife, just, that feel. But one of the things that I've at least recognized in your knives, outside of really nice Damascus or unique shaped blades or great steel, but it's the functionality of the knife.
Yes.
You mentioned earlier, ideas that you have about, with your current job that sort of translate over into your design thoughts and what can have opportunity. Do you think your designs are more towards the uniqueness of how a blade opens, or it's, held in hand, or just visually what it looks like versus, it having a nice blade? I don't mean to simplify that way, but I've noticed the functionality of your knife really stands out.
Well, you know what? I think a lot of knife makers have forgotten. They always think tactical. But if you go back into time and look at the shapes of knives, some of my ideas come from looking back in time, right? If you look at most knives, working knives, let's put it that way, in the past didn't have a point, right? A point is hardly ever used in a knife unless you're stabbing something, right? Or you're thinking of killing, right? Most of the time, if you look into history and you look at the knives that people carried or used, they don't have a point. Some of them are squared off, like a cleaver, right? Because it's more functional. I made a knife that a while ago, the round knife. You ever seen that one round knife I had that sort of swiveled out?
Absolutely.
And it was based on the ulu knife, the ULU. And they've been used for thousands of years. There's the round knives that are used for skinning and cutting and stuff like that. And so when I think of a knife, I don't necessarily think tactical, right? I think how useful is the knife, right? And sometimes even safety. A cleaver knife, you don't have to worry about poking yourself, but it does 99% of everything you need to do. Right? Yeah. So I think how functionally a knife will work better in your pocket, but there's also a fidget factor with knives, right? If you make a knife correctly, some people will send me a message saying, Darriel, I had this knife in my hand for so long that I have a callus on my thumb, my thumb is getting tired because I've opened it up, 800 times, in 2 days.
Right? That kind of style knife, you really hit the nail on the head. I'm talking about, how things work and you design, but the functionality, you use the right word. That I have found it truly as a novice. By no means was I anyone of any knowledge. I'm your average Joe, if you will, as it relates to knives and things that I've even collected. But as I've learned over the last 2.5 years and watch, it's functionality, right? It's that, it's that uniqueness that really tends to come out in some of those unique designs.
And that I make some small knives, like I said, for office warriors or desktop warriors. And you want a knife to not be threatening, right? When you're in the office, you want a knife you can pull out and use and not really threaten somebody. If you pull out a Rambo knife in the office, you're probably going to be pulled into your boss's office, right? So I also think that not everybody who wants to carry a knife is a person who's out there, a Navy SEAL. You know what I mean? There's people who like the functionality of a knife and being able to cut something, cut open a package, maybe your kid's shoestrings are too long, you cut those. I've done that before, I mean, there's a functionality of knife and enjoyment to be able to have a tool that you can carry easily and take with you anywhere. And like I said, you don't have to be a Rambo, right? You can be the mother at Walmart who is opening a bag of chips for your kids. It could be anything.
So your everyday could change daily. If you had to pick your Thursday daily carry, what's the Thursday daily carry?
In front of you, what do you like?
Okay, so this knife right here is a knife that I made that is all 3D printed in some form or another. So the blade is made with precision casting. It's cobalt. And what I do is I make a wax of it. They put it in the precision casting mold and they burn that wax out and then they put the metal in there. The handle is 3D titanium, right?
Titanium 3D.
Yeah, titanium 3D, and the pivot is made of titanium. So this knife right here won't rust at all. It's one of those knives you can put in your tackle. The handle is all integral, right? It's just one piece, right? But I do have it coated also with a black DLC, and the blade is coated with DLC. It didn't require it. I just think it looks slick and neat that way. Well, this knife right here, I carry probably about 3 days a week, right? This is probably my go-to knife I carry in my pocket. I just love this little thing. And this is probably the size of knife I really like to carry. Unless we're going hiking or camping or something, then I'll carry something a little bit bigger or a lot bigger.
So on that knife, to close that, you just have to overcome the back, that arm tension.
Yeah, that's actually an integral slip joint. The slip joint is part of it. I said if I'm going to 3D print it, I might as well make that slip joint integral to the handle.
That's very awesome.
Yeah. And as I don't know if Matt told you, we're trying to get into the European market anyway. So I'll probably do more non-locking knives in the future, a little bit more than I've done in the past. I was telling Matt this not too long ago. My wife's family in Italy, my wife is Italian. She's second generation. They were having a dinner party, right? And they had all these people over, and this guy whips out a knife, and I don't know how the conversation, and it was one of my knives. And he was saying, this guy is really awesome. I love his knives. They're really unique. And then my family from over there said, "Oh, we know that. That's my cousin's, husband. He's D-Rocket Design." It just shows you how small the world is and how you can affect the world in different ways. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
Well, we definitely shipped some knives all over the globe.
Yeah, we have. So that's the knife I carry mostly. So
I'm so sorry, Darrell.
Yeah.
That was just the Thursday EDC.
Right.
Yeah.
The baddest thing I think I've seen in 2.5 years. That is truly even a new one to me. So I do have one question before we move on.
Okay.
And it's probably, and don't mention the hatchet, but you said, it might be something a little larger, just the weekend, or if you go camping. Beyond amazing 3D titanium awesomeness, what's the Saturday, what's the weekend, and I mean camping?
Oh my God. I still carry the Zulu. I think the Zulu is one of the best little knives. It's light, it's just a good little knife, I don't know if you got a chance to see, but this one's the Ultim Zulu. And this it's on my desk because I carry it a lot, right? I carry this Ultim OTF a lot because it's very light. I can put it in the backpack. I can put it in my day pack, and it doesn't take up any room whatsoever. I don't usually carry it in my pocket, because usually I'm wearing shorts or something when I'm hiking or something like that.
Yeah.
So that's
Here's
probably
the oddity of what you just had, so that he can actually look at this. So this was the very first knife that Darrell ever said, "Hey, sure, just hold on to it, play with it." But he was holding, ironically, you pull that out. And that was the very first knife that you, as obviously the partner, said, "Take a look at it, hold it."
It is so light.
It's so light, but it's strong.
When you mentioned that, I thought I'd give him the real one to hold.
Yeah, I think the lightness of that makes it a very easy carry. I think we're going to do, for the golf tool, I think we're going to do some Ultim too, just to keep it lighter, the bigger one. I think that would be a good mix.
I
Also.
agree.
So
is that machine, is it Ultim? I don't even know what this is. What truly is this material?
now this is going back to my nerdiness and my engineering stuff, but Ultim is a material that was made by NASA that was used in the space program. It was a lightweight plastic. I think the term they use is PEI. I'm not sure. It's like a poly blah, 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 something. So it's one of those names that it's hard to say. But NASA needed a plastic in which they could use in space that could take the rigors of temperature changes, right?
Okay.
It gets very cold, it gets very hot, but also it had to have the ability to be strong, right? Because the rocket shakes like a bastard, right? And they wanted to put some plastic in between circuit boards and this and that, and they created this material called Ultim, and it's pretty much a high-tech plastic. It is, but it's not like your regular plastic. It has some really unique properties to it. So
it's awesome. It's nice. It's amazing how light it is, and I mean, you can't even squeeze it in your fingers. I mean, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't buckle at all.
Hey, those, and you and I both know, you know more than I, but those as well as even small ones, those flew off the shelf.
Yeah, they did.
Those were in my 2.5 years the fastest selling product. Uniquely the Ultim, but certainly the Zulu.
Yeah.
Well, Darriel, we're running kind of out of time for this part. We're definitely going to have a part 2. Hopefully, you'll come back and talk to us. But
I'll be there.
Kind of on closing, tell us one thing that people would be surprised to know about you.
Okay, I said that was a hard one, but I think that I crave knowledge. I'm probably the biggest nerd, or maybe you noticed that already, but I'm a super nerd, right? My kids call me a nerd, and I think that's all right too. I crave knowledge. I soak up stuff. I read voraciously. I'm the type of person that sits here and watches Discovery Channel on how the Vikings, went across. I just love that information. I think that's the wonderful thing that my mother has given me. I'm not a jock. I played football. I did all this stuff, but I think the reason I went into engineering is I love knowledge. I just love God is an engineer. That's what I think. If he is an engineer, I'm just fascinated how wonderful this world and this universe is put together. It blows me away. I just saw something on TV on the Discovery Channel, right? That if this world that we live on was 2% further back or 2% further up, right? Or 2% faster going around the sun, it wouldn't work out. It's like we're in this perfect zone. It's a privilege to be alive and to understand that and to think about that everybody here is a miracle. We all beat the odds. We all have won the lottery ticket 20 times over, right? It's just, I'm just in awe of the world and the people around me and the things. I just think it's such a privilege to be alive and to be able to think and function and design and create art and give people joy and give people love. And, I feel like I won the lottery. And so if you didn't know anything about me, I feel like I've won the lottery in life. That's
good. I mean, it's nice to hear. It's a fresh air to know somebody is happy to be here, enjoying life, loving everything about it, and not complaining about needing more money or anything else. Good words. That was nice to hear.
Well, thank you.
So, I think we're going to wrap this up as part 1 today, and we'll get together probably mid next week or something, if that works out for everybody.
That works.
We had a lot of questions, and we'll try to get through a couple more, and this kind of get a feel for you now. We kind of know how it's going, and I think everything went well.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. I tell you what, Darriel, you talk about obviously the passion and value of history, and in many ways, maybe you're making that history. maybe defining that history for your space and, for your market. So, I actually look forward to having more of these and hearing more about you.